Imagine for a second that tomorrow morning the British government announces a program to build 500,000 homes. Not as an aspiration, not over the next 20 years, next year. The money has been approved, the Treasury has signed it off, the announcement has been made. The headlines are already written, and for a few hours perhaps it feels as though the housing problem has been solved, because that is normally where the public conversation stops. Where will the money come from? Can the government afford it? What will it cost the taxpayer? How much will need to be borrowed? And once those questions have apparently been answered, we behave as though the buildings are almost there. But the next morning, the construction industry wakes up and it asks a slightly different set of questions. Who's going to design all of this? Who's going to coordinate it? Who is going to approve it? Who's going to build it? Where are the bricklayers? Do we have enough bricks? Where are the electricians? Where are the engineers, supervisors and design managers? Which factories will produce the windows, reinforcement, insulation, electrical equipment, mechanical systems? Where will the additional electricity come from? Where will the water come from? Where will the materials be stored? How will they be transported? Which roads, railways, ports and utility networks will support the program? And perhaps most importantly, how long will it take to create the capability that does not currently exist? Because approving money is one decision. Producing 500,000 functioning homes is an entirely different system. That is what I want to talk about today. Money is not the constraint. Now, that sounds provocative, I know, perhaps even irresponsible, could be. Business run out of money and they go bankrupt, right? Families run out of money, contractors become insolvent, developers lose funding, projects stop when the cash stops. So of course money can be a constraint for an individual, a company, a council, a contractor, or a particular project. But that is not the level I'm talking about. I'm looking from it from the top down, instead of looking at it from the bottom up. At the level of a sovereign state that issues its own currency, establishes the legal framework, appoints institutions, delegates authority, and decides how the financial system operates, at that level, money is not a naturally occurring substance that the government must first discover somewhere in the economy. The state defines the currency. It establishes the institutions that administer it. It decides which payments are legally recognized. It determines how taxes are collected. It determines how public debt is issued. It creates the rules within which banks, businesses and investors operate. Those rules matter. Institutions matter. Parliamentary authority matters. But we should not confuse the system designed by the state with a force that exists above the state. The state can change the rules. It can reorganize institutions. It can alter mandates. It can change taxation, change borrowing arrangements. It can direct spending. It can create pounds. What it cannot do is create physical reality by decree. I cannot pass an act of parliament and produce then 1,000 experienced electricians next Tuesday. It cannot issue a press release and create more steel. It cannot appoint a committee and double the capacity of the electricity grid. It cannot instruct concrete to cure faster. It cannot command a factory into existence overnight. It can fund those things. It can plan for them. It can organize them. It can invest in them. But somebody still has to make them real. That is the constraint. People make projects that brings profits, but profits decides which projects get built and what people become. This is Bytnar Talks. People, projects, profits. Hi, I'm Piotr Bytnar, founder of Bytnar Limited, a chartered structural engineering practice established in 2017. And this episode is called Money is not the constraint. Can government pay forever? Let me begin with a simple image, okay? Imagine a football stadium where the referee also controls the scoreboard. Every time a team scores, the referee presses a button and the number appears. The scoreboard never runs out of digits. It does not have to collect an old number before displaying a new one. It does not borrow a number from another stadium. It does not ask the spectators to donate a few spare digits before the match can continue. The number is simply recorded, but that does not mean the team can score infinite goals. It still needs players, it needs a pitch, it needs time, it needs organization, it needs physical effort. The ball still has to cross the line. The scoreboard can record any number. The game still has to be played. And I think modern money works in a surprisingly similar way. The financial system can record claims, it can credit accounts, it can create balances, it can issue securities, it can expand lending, it can move extraordinary sums across the economy in seconds. But the financial record is not the physical achievement, is it? Money is a claim on resources. It is not the resource itself. A pound is not a brick. It is a claim that may allow you to obtain a brick. A budget is not a bridge. It is authority to compete for the labor, materials, energy, and time needed to build one. A funding announcement is not productive capacity. It is a financial signal sent into the productive system. The important question is what happens when that signal arrives. Does spare capacity exist? Can supply expand? Can workers be trained? Can factories increase production? Can the grid support the additional demand? Can organizations coordinate the program? Or does the new money simply begin competing for the same limited resources already serving other projects? That distinction changes the whole conversation, in my opinion. Because we normally assume that the money is real and the capacity will somehow follow. But from the top down, it is almost the opposite. The physical capacity is real. The money is the system of claims we create around it. I think it's good to compare that to the household. Most people are thought to understand public spending through a household story, okay? A household must earn money before it spends. A business must receive income, borrow or use savings. A contractor must manage cash flow. A developer must secure finance. So the government, we assume, must operate in much the same way. Tax comes in, government spending goes out. If government spends more than it collects, it borrows the difference. And if it borrows too much, eventually it runs out of money. The story is easy to understand, isn't it? It feels responsible, it feels real, it feels tangible. It also describes the experience of almost everyone living inside the monetary system. But the contractor of the creator of the system does not stand in exactly the same position as its users. You and I cannot create pounds that other people are legally required to accept. Well, we perhaps can, but it will end up we know where. A contractor cannot issue sterlings, okay? A business cannot impose taxation in sterling. A household cannot establish a central bank. The state can. That does not mean the state is omnipotent. It means the analogy has limits. The government is not simply a very large household. It is the institution that defines the monetary environment in which households operate. And once you see that, a lot of familiar language begins to look different. Where will the money come from? From the monetary system the state itself establishes and authorises. Can the government run out of pounds? Not in the same mechanical sense as a household that cannot credit its own account. Does that mean it can spend without limits? No. Because creating the pounds does not create what the pounds are trying to purchase. The financial limit moves. It does not disappear. Instead of appearing first as an empty bank account, it appears through inflation, shortages, currency pressure, overstretched institutions, political resistance, and declining trust. The government may still be able to make the payment. The question becomes what the payment will command. That is the real difference. The household question is, do I have enough money? The sovereign question is, does the economy have enough capacity? Those are not the same things. This is normally where somebody asks, if government does not need to collect its own currency before it can issue it, why do we pay tax? And it is a fair question. And I'm not a tax expert, nor the economical expert or any type of financial monetary expert whatsoever. I'm just a well-read bloke. Well, tax is not irrelevant from what I see. Quite the opposite. Tax is one of the most powerful instruments in the whole system. It creates demand for the national currency because people must obtain that currency to settle obligation to the state. It removes purchasing power from the economy. It influences behavior. It redistributes income and wealth. It changes the balance between private and public claims on real resources. And it gives the system political legitimacy. When government spends, it sends purchasing power into the economy. When it taxes, it removes some of that purchasing power. That matters because the economy has a limited capacity to respond to any given moment. Imagine that the construction sector has enough spare labor, materials and equipment to build another 100 schools. Government spending can bring that idle or underused capacity into production. People are employed, factories receive orders, buildings are delivered. The economy produces more. Now imagine that every competent contractor is already fully occupied. There are shortages of engineers, electricians, steel, transform plants and utility capacity. Government announces the same 100 schools. The money enters the market, but the spare physical capacity is not there. So those projects begin competing with hospitals, housing, warehouses, energy projects, and private developments already underway. The government may still be able to pay, but the payment begins changing prices and relocating resources. Taxation can reduce some competing private demand. It can create space for public activity. That does not mean every tax decision is sensible. It means tax is part of how the state manages claims on finite resources. Seen from the bottom up, tax appears to finance the state. Seen from the top down, tax also helps organize the economy beneath the state. It determines who retains spending power. It influences which activities expand. It influences which activities contract. And it helps control how much total demand presses against the country's productive capacity. That is a very different role from filling up a government piggy bank. Government borrowing creates similar confusion. We say that the government borrows from financial markets because it needs their money. But where did the pounds held by those financial markets originate? They exist inside the monetary system established by the state. The private sector does not sit outside sterling, supplying pounds to Britain as though sterling were a foreign commodity. It operates inside the system. Government bonds provide investors with an interest-bearing financial asset. They supply savings. They support pensions and insurance. They help organize liquidity. They influence interest rates. They provide financial institutions with assets regarded as highly secure. They form part of how the state chooses to structure public finance. Under the current rules, government deficits and bond issuance are closely connected, but those rules are political and institutional arrangements. They are not physical laws. That distinction is important. I'm not saying rules do not matter because the government can change them. Contracts are rules. Planning law is a set of rules. Building regulations are rules. They still shape reality, but we should understand the hierarchy. The institutions do not create the sovereign state. The state creates and delegates authority to the institutions. The producers do not exist beyond political choice. The procedures do not exist beyond political choice. They are the current method through which political choice is organized. The state may decide to operate with fiscal rules, it may decide to issue bonds, it may delegate monetary policy, it may restrict direct coordination between institutions. Those choices may have good reasons behind them. They may protect against abuse. They may support confidence, they may create discipline, but they remain choices. Steel production is not a choice in the same sense. You cannot vote a ton of steel into existence. You cannot amend the standing orders of parliament and produce a qualified engineer. You can alter the financial and institutional coordination around production. The production still has to happen. That is why I keep returning to the real economy, in the sense that we have both in the reality. There's real economy and financial economy. Because the financial system is flexible in a way the physical system is not. Money moves in seconds, capability develops over years. Imagine walking into a builder's yard and asking for 1,000 bricks. You have a suitcase full of cash. More than enough. The merchant looks at the money, then looks across the yard. I only have 200 bricks. You point at the suitcase. He points at the yard. You offer double the price. That might change who gets the bricks. It does not create another 800 bricks by lunchtime. Perhaps they were reserved for another contractor. Your higher offer may redirect them to you. Perhaps the manufacturer can increase production next month. Perhaps the factory can add another shift. Perhaps a lorry can be redirected from another region. The system may respond, but it responds through production, logistics, labor and time. Not through the money itself. And somebody else may now wait. That is the part we often miss. Money does not only mobilize resources. When resources are constrained, money relocates them. The person able to pay more may get access first. The project with stronger political backing may receive priority. The contractor with better supplier relationships may secure the production slot. The public program may displace a private project. The private project may offer more and retain the labor. The resource does not multiply. Its distinction changes. Scale that up across the country. Housing competes with infrastructure. Infrastructure competes with energy. Energy competes with commercial development. All of them compete for land, labor, materials, equipment, professional attention and regulatory capacity. Every project may be fully funded. The country may still be unable to deliver all of them at once. That is where money stops being the answer. There is another distinction we need to make. Capacity and capability are often treated as though they mean the same thing. They do not. Capacity is the amount of activity a system can carry. More people, more equipment, more projects, more hours. Capability is whether the system can organize that activity successfully. Can people make coherent decisions? Can different disciplines coordinate? Can information move to the right place? Can uncertainty be managed? Can experienced judgment be applied where it matters? Can the organization learn before the problem repeats? A company can increase capacity very quickly. It wins more work, it recruits more people, it opens another office, it appoints another management layer. The headcount rises, the turnover rises, the organization looks stronger. But if growth happens faster than supervision, coordination and knowledge can develop, capability may fall. The experienced people become stretched. They are pulled into more meetings, their names appear on more projects, they review more documents, they make more decisions with less time. Junior staff receive responsibility earlier, not necessarily because they are ready, but because the workload exists. The company has more people. It may have less attention available per project. You see this in construction repeatedly. A market becomes busy and everybody tries to scale. Contractors take on more work, consultants accept more appointments, specialists spread themselves across more projects, clients launch more schemes, there is movement everywhere. Then, interfaces begin to weaken. Responses take longer, coordination becomes more formal and less effective, people send information rather than making sure it is understood, meetings multiply because nobody is quite confident that the other meetings are resolving anything. You can feel the system getting busier. You cannot always feel it becoming more capable. Money can buy additional capacity. It cannot instantly buy mature capability. You can recruit an engineer, you cannot purchase the 10 years of judgment they have not yet had the chance to develop. You can appoint a project manager, you cannot guarantee that the organization run them will allow decision to be made. You can employ a consultant, you cannot assume that every interface between appointments is now coordinated. Capability sits between people. It exists in relationships, authority systems, experience and trust. That takes time. And time remains one of the few things money cannot create. Now going back to the 500,000 homes, where we sort of have that sort of 1.5 million for the term of the parliament. Well, but let's get back to it, to that 500,000 homes announcement. Assume the money exists, okay? What happens next? Land has to be identified, planning has to be achieved, infrastructure has to be assessed, the homes need roads, drainage, water, electricity and communication networks. Some locations will need schools, some will need healthcare, some will need public transport. The planning authority needs people able to review the applications. The utility companies need people able to assess the connections. The design teams need enough experienced staff to produce coordinated information. Contractors need enough labor and management. Manufacturers need enough productive capacity. The program needs to fit within the availability of all of them. This is where national ambition meets sequence, because the work cannot all begin at the same time simply because the money was approved at the same time. Some areas do not have grid capacity. Some water systems cannot support further development. Some roads are already overloaded. Some sites require years of remediation. Some plans depend on infrastructure that has not itself been designed. And every program competes for the same decision-making institutions. If government wants to build at scale, it cannot only fund the end product. It has to build the delivery system. It has to invest in planning capacity, training, manufacturing, energy, utilities, transport, technical education, research, professional institutions, client capability, long-term pipelines that allow businesses to invest with confidence. Otherwise, it does not create a building program. It creates a competition for whatever capacity happens to exist when the announcement is made. And then we call the resulting price increase a cost overrun. Inflation is normally described as too much money chasing too few goods. That is not wrong per se, but it can sound abstract. In construction, you can watch the mechanism happening. Imagine 10 contractors need a tower crane, alright? Only 3 suitable cranes are available. The crane does not become larger, it does not become more advanced, it does not become twice as productive, but the higher rates rises. Why? Because access has become more valuable. The contractors are not only paying for the crane, they are bidding against each other for priority. The price begins deciding who receives the resource. One project secures the crane, one delays, one changes its construction method, one redesigns, one imparts important equipment, one abandons the program. Inflation has quietly renegotiated access. The same thing happens with labor. An experienced design manager receives several offers. Companies increase salaries. A contractor recruits from another contractor. The person moves. The industry has not gained another experienced design manager. The capability has moved between organizations. One company appears stronger, another becomes weaker. The national capacity did not increase. The financial claim increased. Over time, higher salaries may encourage more people into the profession. Training may expand, companies may invest. But the short-term response is allocation, not creation. This is why spending into a constraint system produces a different outcome from spending into a system with spare capacity. Where spare capacity exists, spending can create additional output. Where it does not, spending often changes price, ownership, and priority. And inflation is not neutral. It decides who can continue, who has to reduce scope, who waits, who passes the cost down onwards, who absorbs it, who fails. The government can issue more pounds to meet a higher project budget, But if the real capacity remains unchanged, the additional pounds may simply support the new price. The project still obtains roughly the same physical resources. It now requires a larger number to do so. That does not mean the spending was necessarily wrong. It means the spending encountered a real limit. There is a strange thing that happens on projects when more funding becomes available. Usually activity increases, more consultants are appointed, more workstream begins, more packages are advanced, more reports are produced, more meetings appear. It looks like progress. And sometimes it is. But activity and progress are not the same thing. If the project has not resolved its central dependencies, increasing activity may increase the number of decisions being made around unresolved assumptions. The structural design moves forward before the operational brief is stable. The facade progresses before movement tolerances are understood. Equipment is ordered before the space is coordinated. Early works begin before the main logistics have been settled. Every action commits the project a little further. Flexibility is being spent. That may be necessary in these circumstances, but somebody needs to understand what the project is becoming committed to. This is where money can create false confidence. The client thinks, we have funded the extra design resource. The design team thinks, we have produced more information. The contractor thinks, we have protected the program. The board sees expenditure and activity, but the interfaces may still be unresolved. The system has more motion, it does not necessarily have more coherence. And the more money committed, the harder it becomes to pause. People say the project is too far advanced to reconsider. The decision may be poor, but reversing it now looks expensive, so the project continues. Not because the route is still correct, because the money already spent has made the route politically difficult to question. That is not a shortage of finance, it is a shortage of decision quality. We spend a lot of time asking whether the construction industry has enough capability. Do contractors have enough labor? Do consultants have enough engineers? Do manufacturers have enough production? But a large investment program also requires capable clients. Being a client is not simply holding the budget. A client has to define what is needed. It has to decide which outcomes matter. It has to establish authority. It has to understand risk. It has to select a procurement route. It has to make decisions when options are imperfect. It has to connect financial, technical, and operational priorities. And it has to know enough to recognize when the project is no longer producing the intended asset. You can employ advisors, okay, you can. You can appoint a project manager. You can employ architects, engineers, quantity surveyors, and contractors. But somebody representing the investing organization still has to own the need. That responsibility cannot be completely outsourced. This becomes visible when a difficult decision appears. Every option has consequences. One protects the program, but increases costs. One protects costs, but reduces performance. One protects performance, but creates delivery risk. The technical team explains the consequences, the commercial team explains the exposure, the project manager explains the decision date, and the client discovers that nobody in the room has authority to choose. The issue goes upwards. Another paper is produced, the steering group requests assurance, the project continues around the uncertainty, the money is available, the decision is not. That is a constraint. You cannot solve it by increasing the contingency. You have to improve the route through which information becomes authority and authority becomes action. So we get to the moment where pound meets the world, all right? So far we've spoken mostly about domestic capacity, but construction in Britain does not operate entirely inside Britain. We import materials, we import machinery, we import energy, we import components. We depend on international supply chains. Steel, copper, aluminium respond to international markets. Electrical equipment may come from specialized factories elsewhere. Mechanical system cross borders, replacement parts cross borders. Construction equipment is manufactured globally. Even products manufactured domestically may rely on imported energy or components. The government can create pounds. It cannot require the rest of the world to exchange real goods for those pounds at any price Britain chooses. This is where monetary sovereignty meets international reality. If the country increases domestic spending while relying heavily on imported resources, demand for foreign goods can rise. If the pound weakens, the same goods require more pounds. The government can create the additional pounds, but it cannot create the previous purchasing power abroad. That is a real limit, not because a foreign institution has sovereignty over Britain, because the physical resources are outside Britain. The state controls the pound. It does not control every mine, factory, energy source and shipping route in the world. This is why domestic productive capability matters so much. A country with strong energy production, manufacturing skills and infrastructure has more freedom to turn financial decisions into real outcomes. A country that has allowed those systems to weaken may retain monetary sovereignty but become increasingly dependent on external productive capacity. It can create the claim, somebody else still has to supply the resource. That makes industrial policy a monetary issue. Training engineers is a monetary issue. Building factories is a monetary issue. Energy resilience is a monetary issue. Not because those things create the currency, because they determine what the currency can mobilize. Money becomes powerful when productive capacity stands behind it. This sounds like national economics. Then it appears in an ordinary projects meeting. The supplier says a critical item has a 40-week lead time. Why? The factory has a full order book. A component is difficult to source. Energy prices change production costs. Shipping is uncertain. Several countries are investing in similar infrastructure. The exchange rate move. None of this appears in the meeting as a macroeconomic debate. It appears as a design decision that can no longer be delayed. The opening must be confirmed. The structural load must be confirmed. The electrical supply must be confirmed. The order has to be placed. But the wider design remains uncertain. So the team has to decide which uncertainty it is willing to carry. Order now and accept design risk. Wait and accept program risk. Change the product and accept technical risk. Increase the budget and accept financial risk. There is no clear options. That is where capability becomes visible. Not when every answer is known, when the organization must make a coherent decision under uncertainty. Money can pay for whichever option is selected. It cannot select the right one. It cannot ensure the disciplines understand each other. It cannot create ownership. It cannot make the consequences visible. That work is performed by people. You see, money does not create coordination. If government launches several major programs together, it increases demand across shared systems. Planning authorities, utility companies, consultants, contractors, manufacturers, regulators, transport networks, professional institutions. The project may be separate financially. Operationally, they are connected. They share people, they share supply chains, they share infrastructure. They share the same limited attention. If every program behaves as though it is the national priority, the system becomes overloaded. Information then slows down, responses become less reliable, experienced people become bottlenecks, meetings multiply, reporting increases. People become more careful with language. The program still shows movement, okay? Confidence starts moving the other way. You can usually feel that change before the report admits it. Concerns are raised later, they are expressed more softly. People begin protecting positions, email becomes more formal, commercial notices appear. The project is still funded, the coordination environment is weakening. That is why large investment programs need more than capital allocation. They need system design, which projects move first, which dependencies must be resolved, where does capacity need to grow, what work can be sequenced, which skills will become scarce, which factories need confidence to invest, what infrastructure enables everything else. Without that thinking, a pipeline is just a long list of competing claims. And there's another thing that really bothers me or I think about is, well, you can print money, but you cannot really print time, can you? Construction has another constraint that is easy to overlook. Yes, and it is time. You can increase shifts, you can add resources, you can prefabricate, you can improve logistics, you can overlap activities, you can build much faster than the industry often builds today. But time cannot be removed completely. Concrete needs to cure, ground needs to be investigated, people need to be trained, factories need to produce, information needs to be created and checked. Approvals need evidence. Some activities depend physically on others. A program can shorten a bar. Reality still contains sequence. This matters because acceleration creates its own demand for capability. If you overlap design and construction, decision must be made earlier. If you order equipment before design completion, the interfaces must be understood sooner. If you increase the workforce, access and supervision must also increase. If you add night shifts, management and logistics must adapt. Acceleration is not merely more money and more people, it is another design problem. The project needs enough maturity to control the additional complexity. Otherwise, the money purchases speed in one area and rework somewhere else. That is why some projects become more expensive without becoming faster. The additional money is not creating more productive time. It is paying for the consequences of a sequence the organization could not control. Legitimacy is another thing to consider. There is another constraint that often arises before financial capacity disappears, and it is public trust. Imagine a government funds a major bridge, okay? The cost rises, the program extends, people accept that complex projects are difficult. Then another project does the same. Then another. Well, it's something like we observe on the BBC day in and day out. The financial system still works. The government can still make payments, but the public conversation changes. People stop asking whether the state can technically afford to continue. They ask whether the system is producing value. Why do announcements appear quickly while completed infrastructure arrives slowly? Why do budgets repeatedly increase? Why does every project require another explanation? Why are people paying more while capacity appears weaker? This is where legitimacy becomes a constraint. A state may control the monetary framework. It still requires political acceptance. People have to believe that public spending produces worthwhile outcomes. They have to believe that institutions are competent. They have to believe the burden is fair. They have to believe mistakes lead to learning. When that trust weakens, governments become cautious. Projects face more scrutiny, more approvals are added, more assurance is required, decision-making slows. Programs become unstable. That instability damages the supply chain. Businesses stop investing. Training is postponed. People leave. Factories do not expand. The next project becomes more difficult. Costs rise further. Trust weakens again. The money still exists. The social authority to mobilize resources becomes more fragile. That is a real constraint. Not a financial one, a political and institutional one. And it is often created by the inability to convert money into visible, reliable physical outcomes. The same thing happens inside projects. There is the confidence shown in the report, and there is the confidence people carry in the room. The report may say the project remains within tolerance, the program may remain amber, the budget may include contingency, the risk register may contain all the right words. But the conversations feel different. People become cautious, the same issue returns several times. Nobody wants to be the first person to say that the project may no longer be under control. The project is still spending, activity remains high, but legitimacy inside the team is weakening. The contractor is less confident that decisions will arrive, the client is less confident in the contractor's information, the consultants are less confident that their concerns are being heard, the board becomes less confident in the project team. Everyone begins protecting themselves. Protection creates administration. Administration consumes time. Time increases cost. Cost creates more scrutiny, and more scrutiny creates more defensive behavior. You can fund every part of that loop. You cannot purchase trust backed through another reporting layer. Trust is produced through behavior, clear ownership, timely decisions, honest recognition of uncertainty. Fair consequences, consistent information, those are capabilities. There is one further layer I'd like to talk about. The economy does not only use money to purchase current production. It also attaches claims to future production. Landowners expect income, lenders expect interest, investors expect returns, developers expect profit, contractors need margin, consultants need fees, pension funds need performance, infrastructure operators expect long-term revenue. None of that is automatically wrong. Without returns, investment does not happen. Without profit, companies do not retain capability. Without wages, people cannot live. But the number of financial claims can grow faster than the physical system underneath it. Imagine an orchard with 10 apple trees, okay? Trees produce a certain harvest. At first, 10 families share it. Then more claims appear. The landowner takes a share, the transporter takes a share, the storage company takes a share, the lender takes a share, the investor takes a share. The number of apples has not necessarily increased. The claims have. Eventually, something has to adjust. The price rises, the share reduced, somebody loses access, more trees are planted, productivity improves, or the system borrows against future harvests. Construction contains a similar tension. Land values can rise faster than productivity. Asset prices can rise faster than physical quality. Infrastructure can accumulate long-term financial obligations. Projects can carry many layers of return expectations. Meanwhile, real construction capability expands slowly. If at all. People need training, okay? Factories need investment. Energy system needs development. Infrastructure needs time. It needs to be all done in a stable system. If financial claims grow rapidly while real capacity remains relatively static, the system becomes more expensive and more fragile. The more the money continues circulating, the transactions continue, but the paper value may continue rising, but the physical system has not necessarily become more capable, especially if that injection is once in a while. That is the difference between financial wealth and productive capacity. A country can appear richer on paper while finding it increasingly difficult to build and maintain the things it needs. And that brings me down to the merit, to the question of this episode. So can government pay forever? In pounds? A sovereign state can continue authorizing sterling payments for as long as its political and institutional system supports those payments. It is not constrained like a household that must obtain pounds from somewhere else. But that is only the nominal side of the question. What will those pounds purchase? That depends on productive capacity. It depends on import. It depends on confidence. It depends on energy. It depends on skills. It depends on whether the spending creates additional output or merely competes for existing output. The state can keep issuing the financial claim. The real economy responds perhaps through growth, perhaps through inflation, perhaps through higher wages, perhaps through currency depreciation, perhaps through shortages, perhaps through changing political behavior. The limit appears in the response of the system, not necessarily in the government's account. That is why the government can create money is not a complete policy. It is the beginning of a different question. What should the money mobilize? What capacity must exist first? What capacity will the investment create? What private demand may need to be reduced? What will be imported? What infrastructure enables the rest? Which projects should be sequenced? Which skills will be needed in 5 years? Which businesses need confidence today to invest for their future demand? Those are construction questions, industrial questions, energy questions, educational questions, organizational questions. Money can support all of them. It does not answer them. A serious national building program would begin by understanding that finance and delivery cannot be separated. It would not simply announce a total number of projects and assume the industry will respond. It would ask what the delivery system needs to become. How many engineers, how many tradespeople, how many supervisors, how many planning officers, how much grid capacity, how much manufacturing, which materials are important, what are the bottlenecks, what infrastructure unlocks other infrastructure, what investment gives businesses enough continuity to train and retain people. This is not central planning in the crude sense. It is recognizing that markets cannot invest confidently against chaotic demand. A contractor will not maintain a workforce indefinitely in case a program eventually starts. A manufacturer will not build a new plant because a politician made an announcement that may disappear after an election. A consultancy will not train specialists if every procurement exercise rewards the lowest immediate fee and treats capability as replaceable. Capacity requires confidence. Capability requires continuity. And that's the merit of it. Let's say it again. Capacity requires confidence. Capability requires continuity. If government wants the real economy to respond, it has to create conditions in which organization can invest before the pressure arrives. That means a believable pipeline, not just a large number. A pipeline that has been thought through, sequenced, prepared, connected to skills, connected to energy, connected to industrial capability, connected to local infrastructure, connected to actual decision-making capacity. Otherwise, every project arrives as an emergency. And emergency demand is expensive. And profit matters here. It is easy to criticize profit when discussing public investment. But profit is part of how productive capacity survives. A contractor that makes no sustainable margin cannot retain experienced people. A manufacturer that cannot earn a return will not build another factory. A consultancy constantly pushed below the cost of competent delivery will reduce time, supervision and training. The system then loses capability. The problem is not that profits exist. The question is what type of behavior produces it. Does profit come from improving productivity, building capability, reducing waste, producing better systems? Or does it come mainly from controlling scarce access, transferring risk or increasing financial claims against a system that is not becoming more productive? Those are very different forms of return. People make projects that bring profits, but profits decide which projects get built and what people become. If the system rewards long-term capability, organizations invest in people. If it rewards short-term extraction, organizations protect the next transaction. What gets rewarded gets repeated, and eventually it becomes the industry. Perhaps we need a different understanding of affordability. The normal question is, can we afford to spend the money? But refusing to invest also has consequences. Infrastructure deteriorates, housing shortages remain, energy constraints remain, productivity suffers, maintenance is postponed, skills leave, companies stop investing, the eventual intervention becomes more urgent, and urgent investment placed into a weakened system creates stronger pressure. So not spending is not neutral. It can reduce future capacity, it can increase future cost, it can make the country less able to respond when investment finally becomes unavoidable. That means the real question may be, can we afford not to build the capability? Does the investment increase future production? Does it remove a bottleneck? Does it improve energy security? Does it train people? Does it strengthen manufacturing? Does it improve transport? Does it reduce future maintenance? Does it help the economy produce more real goods and services? Those investments change what the country can do. They're not merely money moving through accounts. They expand the physical base beneath the currency. And that makes future spending less inflationary because the economy has more capacity to respond. So, money is not the constraint per se, not at the top of the system, not in the way we usually describe it. The state establishes the currency. It creates the institutions. It delegates authority. It determines the rules. It can change those rules. But it cannot change physical reality simply by changing the financial record. The money can be authorized. The account can be credited. The bond can be issued. The budget can be approved. The project still needs people, materials, energy, machinery, infrastructure, coordination, capability, and time. And trust. Those are the things the financial system eventually meets. If spare capacity exists, spending can mobilize it. If spare capacity does not exist, spending begins competing for it. Prices rise, programs stretch, projects displace one another. Imports become more expensive. Financial claims grow. Public confidence weakens. Not because the digits disappeared, because the real system underneath them could not expand at the same speed. Construction makes this visible better than almost any other industry. A spreadsheet can contain any number. A program can display any complete date. A funding announcement can promise any scale. But a building is less accommodating. The ground is what it is. The material exists or it does not. The grid has capacity or it does not. The people are available or they are not. The detail coordinates or it does not. And reality eventually settles the argument. So when somebody asks, can the government afford to build it? Perhaps the answer is, the government can create the pounds. That is not the difficult part. The difficult part is whether we have built the real capability those pounds are meant to mobilize. Because money can organize claims. It can direct activity. It can reward production. It can fund the future. But it cannot replace the physical world. So yeah, no need ending to this one again. Just a change in where we choose to look and how we choose to look. The money may still be there. The real system still has to make something from it. Thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Design the world around you.